My name is Kimberly Cuiwies, and I'm the Redondo Beach PTA Council President. Welcome to tonight's online social media safety forum, presented by the Redondo Beach Unified School District and the Redondo Beach Police Department and RBPTA. Our California State PTA's mission is to positively impact the lives of all children and families. By joining PTA here in Redondo Beach, you help support our efforts to bring you informative events like this evening's forum. I'd now like to introduce to you Patty DeLiva, our VP of Programs. Patty?
Thanks, Kimberly. Hello, everyone. I'd like to just share a few logistics about this evening's event. First up, this is a Zoom webinar. Only our panelists can be seen during this forum. As an attendee, you will hear the presentation, but you will automatically be muted and your screen cannot be seen. Please ask any questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Your questions will be shared with the panelist and they will answer as many as possible after the presentation. Tonight's presentation will be in English with Spanish interpretation available. If you'd like to access the Spanish translation, please go to the bottom of the screen and click on the interpretation button. And lastly, this session will be recorded. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Anthony Toronto, Executive Director of Student Services for the Redondo Beach Unified School District, who will give you an overview of tonight's presentation. Dr. Toronto?
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, Patty, and we also have Raymer here supporting us tonight from the Redondo Beach PTA. We appreciate the support of our PTA and helping us provide to you this very important event. And so before we begin, we're going to be working tonight to really address a problem that maybe you're aware of or not, that's hitting a lot closer to home than what maybe families are aware of. And what I mean by that is the importance of being in tune and what's going on with your child as it relates to online and social media safety. More specifically, making sure that you as parents are aware of who is your child communicating with when they're online. We know right now for the past year plus, our students were primarily engaged in distance learning. They were online more than ever, but online goes beyond a Chromebook or a laptop or a desk device. It goes to devices such as your cell phone. Who are your children communicating with? We want to make sure we provide you with valuable tips that you as parents can use in your household to protect your child from the online dangers that exist in the reality of our world and even closer to home here in Redondo. And so tonight, I am excited to introduce members of the Redondo Beach Police Department who are going to share with you some things that they have seen in the field, things that they have experienced, and ways that you as family members can support your child and protect them. And so tonight we have Detective Ryan Harrison, and we have our two school resource officers, Jenna Wolfinger and Rex Yap, who are going to guide us through the importance of online and social media safety. And as you're continuing, it looks like we're looking at the results of the online polls. We wanted to start this off with you because, as I mentioned, so many things and so many things that are happening on our kids' devices. And so we wanted to get an idea, does your child have a cell phone? And it's pretty close. Look at the results. It's 46% say yes, 54 no. Does your child have access to an online payment platform such as Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, etc.? It's great. 100% of you said no. And there's a reason why we asked that question. I'll let the RBPD talk about that. And do you have 100% access to your child's cell phone, including the passcodes to social media accounts? 63% of you said yes, 38% said no. And so tonight, as we go through this presentation, hopefully you'll learn some valuable tips in terms of why it's important for you to have access to their passcodes, because at the end of the day, probably more often than not, you actually own those phones. Your kids think that they're their phones, but you actually own them and you pay for them. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Detective Harrison with the Redondo Beach Police Department.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Hope so. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. We're going to breeze through a pretty quick PowerPoint. I'm hoping that the PowerPoint will help stir some conversation, and this presentation is primarily geared towards concerns that you have as parents. So we're hoping there will be a very hefty Q&A session. So once we get through this, we'll get to all those questions. So again, thank you for taking the time, and we're gonna start the presentation. You mind going to the first slide, Dr. Toronto? Thank you. So why we're here, there is we'll call it another epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, problem related to our children being targeted online. So for those of you that aren't familiar, there is a national clearinghouse. It's called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They're responsible for gathering the data and collecting information related to online child abuse. And in the year 2020, there was a dramatic increase in the amount of child sexual abuse that was reported online. That includes child sexual abuse material being distributed, online enticement where people are trying to meet with your children, things like that. There were over 21.7 million reports in 2020 where our kids are being targeted, which is a huge increase versus past years, obviously, because kids are spending more time on their devices, being at home, and the predators know that. Specifically in Redondo Beach, we've had several instances of online enticement where people have presented themselves as children and try to target our kids, try to get them to meet. There's a lot of different scams going on and efforts that these bad guys are doing to target our kids. One of them is providing your children with gifts in exchange for your child sending child sexual abuse material self-produced on their phones, which can be in the form of nude photographs, videos where your children are engaging in sexual acts in exchange for gift cards, food, etc. And there's even been instances in Redondo where we've had child victims engaging with these predators, so much so that the predators have actually made their way to Redondo Beach in an effort to meet up in person with the child. We've also had numerous investigations related to individuals in our city engaging in the online trade of child sexual abuse material. That's a pretty prevalent problem that we're experiencing right now. So this is a super important topic for us at the police department, and we really want to open that line of communication with the parents, the school district, so that we can do our best to protect our kids.
So Detective Harrison, before I move on to the next slide, because I still see we have more people joining, which is great. You brought up some interesting statistics. I wanted to share another one that I know I looked up in preparation for tonight, and it was a stat from the FBI, which reported that over 50% of victims of online sexual exploitation are between the ages of 12 and 15. And so I don't know in your experience if that's what you're seeing. And then one of the questions I know that already has come through, we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but when it comes to those students between 12 and 15 years old, they're very susceptible to grooming or being manipulated by the adults online. Is it to one gender or the other, or are you seeing it that it's male and female?
So in the few cases that I referenced earlier, they had been predominantly middle school aged girls. But this is a crime that affects both male and females almost equally. It just depends on where that the targeting occurs. Generally for our teenage girls, the place where they're being targeted is generally social media, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. And then for our boys, they're being targeted on various gaming platforms, just with the advancement of, technology. I'm sure a lot of parents that have middle school age kids, high school age kids, even elementary school, they have what maybe they describe as their online friends, and they think it's, little Johnny who lives a couple states over, but in reality, we have no idea who's on the other end of, that gaming screen. So our boys are equally susceptible.
Yeah, that's interesting. You pointed out that maybe more so for boys, it's happening through the gaming opportunities, because we know that a lot of our young males engage with who they believe are their peers in these online platforms for various games. And so thank you for sharing that. And so I'll move on to the next part. What do we do in terms of keeping our kids safe? Like, what does this mean for us?
So it's a huge problem, and there isn't really one single approach that's going to work best. It's really going to require, our students, the parents, our educators, us as police officers, collaborating together to kind of attack this problem. And one of the biggest things that we can do, I think it just comes down to having established relationships with our kids that are where you are aware of kind of their ins and outs. What's going on. You're not detached from what they're doing. Just being very engaged and present is one of the biggest things that we can do as parents and educators, as law enforcement, to protect our kids. And we'll go into that more.
Thank you. So what is the role of law enforcement when it relates to dealing with situations where on your end, you're finding out maybe more so as things are happening, where parents are realizing, or you get a report of some online predatory activity? What is the role in law enforcement? And another question came through as well, like, when should parents, what should they do if they believe their child is engaging with a person on the other end of the screen or through the internet that they're not quite sure is actually someone their own age?
So I think as soon as we'll answer the question first and then get into the slide, as soon as you have a concern as a parent, I think that's something that needs to be vetted out and investigated and quite honestly reported to the police. There's, whenever you look at a situation, whether it's like online or for us as police officers, if we're looking at a problem, there's always a perfectly reasonable explanation to what's going on and a perfectly, a totally sinister explanation. And without getting that information, it's impossible for us as law enforcement to vet that out and determine what's what. So really having that open line of communication with parents where they feel comfortable coming to us and letting us help them work through whatever concerns that they have. I think that's super important. And then as far as our law enforcement role, it's kind of flip-flopped here. I think providing the educational opportunities to parents, to educators is probably the first most important thing that we can do as a law enforcement agency. I think there may be some hesitation as it relates to that, because maybe there's fear that if I report this to the police, maybe I'm going to get in trouble for not supervising my child. Maybe my child's going to be in trouble for, seeking out, this, at-risk kind of behavior. And that couldn't be further from the truth. In almost every circumstance, we're not looking to get the victims of these crimes in trouble. We just need to get that information so that we can target the predators. And as far as our initial response, it's really advocating on behalf of the parents and the children. We're not going to dismiss your concerns. Cases like this are probably some of the most important cases that we'll deal with. So we really have a strong belief in advocating on behalf of you and on behalf of your kids to keep them safe online and in their day-to-day lives. And when we do get complaints involving, the online abuse of children, things like that, we investigate these things very, very aggressively. And because a lot of these crimes are happening on the internet, there's always a way for us to work backwards and figure out who these people are. There's nothing on the internet that can't be figured out through various legal processes. So there's a lot of very good information out there that we can obtain once we figure out that there's a crime.
Yeah, I want to highlight one of the bullet points on here, and I have another question to ask you. It talks about effective relationship with stakeholders, parents, educators, students, etc. And you mentioned early on that if a parent believes their child is maybe at risk of engaging in some sort of dialogue with an online predator, that they should contact the police department. And so I encourage families as well. You may be working through RBPD on this matter, but still reach out discreetly and privately to your school administrator and let them know, because the last thing we want to have happen, because online predators, as Detective Harrison was saying, there was one that they did get word that that person was seen or traveled to the Redondo Beach area. And so they were attempting to make contact. The last thing we want is a person coming to a school site claiming to be someone who's on the emergency card for the family, Now, obviously on our end, we're going to verify with the driver's license and seeing if they are listed there or not, but we don't want them trying to come to the school in order to contact your kids. And so please let us know. Again, we have confidentiality with our admin, our counselors, et cetera. So we're there to support you as well as parents and to make sure that we're supporting your child as they go through this experience. And then another question that I wanted to ask you, it related to how do parents, we asked the question to them, why did, do you have an online payment platform such as PayPal, Zelle, Venmo? Why did we ask parents if their child has access to an online payment platform?
So one of the biggest ways that our kids are targeted is the idea that they're going to receive some sort of compensation or benefit from engaging in this behavior with these individuals online. And really, especially as it relates to like the child sexual abuse material, there's a very, very, very dark place in the world where quite a few individuals trade these photos, videos of young girls, young boys being sexually abused. And oftentimes a lot of that material is recycled over and over. So if one of these individuals has the opportunity to, let's say, develop a relationship online with your child and can get new content developed, they may, hey, if you make this video for me, or if you take this photo for me, I'll pay you, $200 or whatever the case is. And they end up reselling that video or that photo at a profit to other individuals who engage in that same sort of criminal activity. So one of the ways they provide that payment is through various online payment platforms such as Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, all of those things.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Officer Wolfinger here. Officer Wolfinger, I know that you are you're back supporting our schools as a school resource officer, but if I remember correctly, you too were also working in the sex crimes division. And so in your experience, what are some of the things you've seen as far as the initial investigative techniques and your role as a police officer?
Yes, I'm very happy to be back. What I've really noticed with kids, and I've talked to you guys about this a few times, and whenever I talk to families who are going through these kinds of things, your kid's phone and your kid's device is just really, for lack of a better way to describe it, a window into their soul. I mean, everything that they put in there, everything that they talk to their friends about, chat about, in secret chat groups, pictures that they're taking, pages that they follow, websites that they're constantly looking at. Those are the things that they're exposed to and the things that they care about. And even the chatter between their friends will be different online than what you hear your kids talking about when their friends are over at your house. So we touched on it earlier, and I was really happy to see that a lot of you do have access to your kids' passwords and stuff on their phone. But one way that Ryan and I have discussed this too, a really good way to keep your kids safe is to be constantly checking their devices. And we tell parents all the time, we encourage them that, it should start young. It should start, my daughter's 7 years old, and this year she was on her iPad more than she's ever been in her entire life. And so I take it upon myself that she knows really every night I go through, she'll text family members, and even family members, I go through and check what is she texting them? I don't know what she's sending, but I want to be involved. And she knows, hey, this is my iPad, but it's actually mom's, and mom pays the bill and mom bought it. And so mom can go through it whenever she wants. And so I'm starting that foundation now, so that when she's in high school, that's already been the rule and it's established. And I just really encourage parents to frequently go through their kids' apps, every app, go through the inbox of Instagram and TikTok. Even kids are chatting back and forth on TikTok. It's unbelievable the ways that kids can be connected nowadays. So that's a huge way that we really suggest that parents stay involved and continue to search all of that on a regular basis.
And so as you see the last bullet point here on the slide, it's about providing educational opportunities for stakeholders, which is why we're meeting tonight. We want to make sure that we continue to provide our community important information to protect your child's safety. And so I'm going to move on to the next piece, and I know that Detective Harrison and Officer Wolfinger just touched on some of these things. It's your role as parents. What part do you play in this, and what can you do, and what do you look for when you're working with your child to ensure their safety online?
So as far as our parent role, we kind of discussed this yesterday, Officer Wolfinger and I. It really it shouldn't start at the middle school age. A lot of these ideas that we want to teach our kids and instill in our kids to protect themselves really start at a very early age, as soon as they have the ability to communicate with you, and then they progressively build as they get older. So a lot of parents talk to their kids as soon as they can talk and understand your private parts are for you, you know things like that. So instilling that in your kids early on, and then just progressively building on that, and teaching your kids about the risks of what's out there on the internet. I think a lot of kids, and I was a kid, and I can kind of relate. We kind of feel like we're invincible, and our parents don't know that much, and it's not as scary as our parents are saying something is. And it's really important for us as parents to just have a good relationship with our kids, so that we can kind of explain the dangers of certain behaviors online, so that our kids can avoid them. And then on the flip side of that, having a good relationship with your kids, so that if they do start to go down the wrong rabbit hole, they feel comfortable coming to you with a problem. A lot of kids that that I've spoken to, they're kind of fearful of coming to their parents with their issue, because they feel that whatever repercussions that they're going to get from their parents are going to be worse than whatever the repercussions are of them engaging with whoever this person is on the internet. And with a lot of these cases, especially when predators are trying to get our kids to self child sexual abuse material, once they get that first photo or that first video, they kind of hold it over your kid's head and say, hey, if you don't, I'm going to send it to your dad's email, your mom's email, your grandpa's email. And all that information is super easy to find. So your kids believe that that's going to happen, and they continue to self-produce for fear of you finding out. So you kind of cut the legs out from that that opportunity if your kids are comfortable coming to you with their issues. And then kind of understanding I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but just with a very basic understanding of, the addictive feelings that come with social media. Our kids thrive, and even adults, they thrive on how many likes they get, how many retweets, how much of this, how much of that. So maybe just being in tune with that, and maybe why your kids are potentially posting a risque photo. I mean, those things are all very big red flags, and those are kind of how our kids get targeted. Someone will pretend to be a child, and they'll see that, little Sally, she tends to post pictures that are maybe a little more on, a little riskier side. They show, a little more skin. They just, maybe not necessarily age appropriate, and that's how they kind of get their in. So just being aware of that, why your kids are doing certain things, and like Officer Wolfinger said, just being very present and in tune with what's going on with your kid, I think is probably the most important thing that we can do as parents, is just being engaged and having open dialogue, so that your kids feel comfortable coming to you, and so that when something's off. Also, you want to expand on that at all, Jenna?
No, the only thing that I would add to it is that sometimes for parents it's overwhelming, because we don't know all the social media platforms that kids are using, and this stuff is so new and it changes all the time, and it's hard to keep up. So just at the very basic level, I mean, I did it today. I did a Google search of, top social media platforms used by teens in 2021. And it'll show you, the top lists, and you go on there if you're not familiar with it, and look around and search and see what you can search for and what's available. And I mean, kids are able to buy narcotics and drugs from social media platforms. And, obviously this is the higher grade levels and stuff, but there's a lot out there. So It can be kind of scary, but we're all, Ryan and I are constantly trying to, look stuff up and to see what kids are looking at. And because like I said, it changes so frequently. So just to try to educate yourself. And if you need help, we're available. We're always available for you guys to ask questions. If you have any concerns, you're not sure if something's right, don't hesitate. Like I always say, we respond to barking dog calls. This is important. This is way more important than a barking dog. So like, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always available. And if you don't feel comfortable, like Mr. Toronto said, if you don't feel comfortable involving the police, the school is always available to you guys too. So don't hesitate. If it seems not right with your kids, if something's up, it's probably not right. And it's something that you need to look into. So we're here, we're available.
Yeah, I want to add to that as well about don't be fearful. And what I mean by that is you got to be proactive in your approach and what you're doing to support your student. Again, we know how much they've been online over the past year and a half through distance learning and such, but through the use of social media and gaming, these predators are posing as a peer, or they're posing as someone that someone around their like age. And so they're trying to lure them in. And so have these honest conversations with your child to create this safe haven. So they know that if something's happening online and it's starting to seem weird about, like, mom or dad, someone asked me to send them a picture of myself, that they feel that they can come to you and they can have this honest conversation. So you can give them the right guidance, or take the other approach and be proactive with them as you're asking them questions about what gaming system are on, what app are you on, or who are you talking to. Just remind them that be careful of what you send to people, because you never know once you send to somebody where it goes from there. And obviously, who are you sending it to? You don't even know if that's the correct person who's there. So again, it's getting into the importance of just creating that safe haven at home for your child to have open dialogue with you, because these things can happen. They've hit very close to home to us here in Redondo Beach. And so we want to make sure that we're providing you with valuable information so you can then use at home. And so one of the other things that comes up through this, and Detective Harrison, please feel free to jump in, is that sometimes these incidents are not isolated strictly to one individual. And what I mean by that is the online predators, they get that one person that they have started to establish direct contact with to ask them to start engaging their peers. And so they have a minor trying to involve another minor into what's going on. And so now you've kind of created a situation where you have one 13-year-old who then asks another 13-year-old to be a part of this grooming or predatory behavior that they've been lured into. And so, Detective Harrison, you want to kind of elaborate on that?
Absolutely. And that's actually, Dr. Toronto hit the nail on the head. We actually had a case just like that, where it came to light because one of the middle school girls became aware of the idea that she could potentially get gifts from what they call a sugar daddy online by posing or by sending pictures and videos. And there was an involved parent who actually caught that pretty quickly and brought it to our attention. And with kids, it's very, no kid wants to be labeled as a snitch. And it took a little bit of conversation and developing a rapport, but we were able to have a conversation with our middle schooler to get the information that we needed to figure out who was targeting, these girls. And just to circle back on that and the law enforcement role and our parent role, where it kind of collides with the specific case that I'm talking about. One issue that we ran into as far as investigators go, we have the ability, if we catch something early enough, to do what's called like account takeovers. Obviously, with the permission of parents, we can take over your children's accounts using their devices and pose as your kid talking to the predator. So that was something that we were hoping to do with the case that I had just talked about. But unfortunately, the parents that were involved in that instance didn't have the passwords for all of their daughter's accounts. So we had to rely on the daughter to provide us with that information. And unfortunately for us, the victim in that case, the daughter, she felt more loyal to the individual that was targeting her and preying upon her than to us as investigators. And when it was the craziest thing I've seen a middle school girl do. But we were like, hey, can you please enter your password into your phone really quick, so that we can do this account takeover? The parents were going to allow us to do that. And within, like, I don't know what she did, but it seemed like half a second, her fingers went, 500 miles a minute, and basically everything on her phone was gone. There was nothing there. And that one investigative hiccup prevented us from pursuing a criminal prosecution on someone who we identified as a child predator, because we lost all of our evidence basically in what was an effort to get her to unlock her phone for us. So if you do have the suspicion, we'll circle back to this again, that something is going on with your children and it's involving their devices, the sooner you can remove those devices from them and potentially give them to us as investigators, we may be able to work backwards and prosecute these people that are targeting our kids.
Thank you. So as I move on to the next slide, I just want to remind our participants that you can submit a question into the Q&A, because we have one slide left, and we realized as we were preparing for tonight, we were going to have some dialogue on the slides, but we really wanted to give you the opportunity, in case you had any questions, that RBPD could be here to answer them. And so I'm going to move on to the next slide, but please, if you have any questions, please add them into the Q&A.
So as far as our students' role in this, they're going to be able to adapt these skills based on the conversations they have with their parents, their educators, with our school resource officers. Just avoiding suggestive screen names or photos like we talked about earlier. That's one very large flag that our kids throw up that make them targets. If they're, if they have their screen name is B Vixen or Sally XXXX, whatever, stuff like that is what these predators are looking for, because it identifies maybe that child as someone who may be more willing to engage in at-risk behavior. Or if they have suggestive photos where they're in sexually suggestive poses, maybe in bathing suits and things like that. I know that's super common in our middle school, with our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. Photos like that make our kids target. Provocative dances that are posted on TikTok or Snapchat, all of those things are big red flags that these online predators target. Being aware that if they're getting showered with flattery online by strangers, that's definitely a big red flag, especially if it's someone they don't know. It's one thing for a friend to say, "Oh my God, girl, you look so good," versus some guy they've never met or some girl they've never met, because a lot of these male predators they pose as young girls too. So just be very wary of strangers on the internet, and in real life. Don't talk to them, don't engage with them. Definitely never arrange to meet with someone that you meet online, is something we want to instill in our kids. And we really want our kids to feel comfortable coming to a parent or a trusted adult when they are encountered with a problem, any type of problem, but especially when it's one involving them being preyed upon by online sexual predators.
I know earlier Officer Wolfinger mentioned in regards to if sometimes you as parents or your children, you're not going to go to RBPD in the event that you believe maybe your child is engaging in this type of behavior. If you come to us as a school, as I mentioned, obviously we're going to be supportive and remain confidentiality, but remember, we are mandated reporters. And so in the event that something was brought to our attention, your child's safety is at risk, we're obviously going to get RBPD involved. And what's great is we have this strong partnership with our police officers, not just here on the camera, but across the entire city, that we can contact them, and we are going to work very closely with them to make sure that as you go through this process, that you feel comfortable and your student feels comfortable. Because we want to make sure we're protecting your student. Again, this is a big safety risk for your children and our children. And so we want to be there to support them. At RBPD, you're in great hands working with not just the people here on the screen, but the entire department. They truly care and are invested in the students here in Redondo Beach. And so we're starting to wind down our overall presentation. There's just a handful of slides, as I mentioned, but some of the takeaways I just want to remind people of, for me at least, is just you got to be open to talk about you talk with your child about online predators. It may be an uncomfortable conversation, but you really have to sit down and have that honest dialogue with them regarding be mindful of who you're communicating with online. Are you sure that that's actually someone who goes to your school? Because you've been in distance learning. How do you know if they actually go there or not? Is it really is, someone that you know from the community or a friend of a friend? You want to discuss risky behavior, such as what are they posting on TikTok? What are they sending on Instagram or whatever else? And then defining healthy relationships. I took a different approach to that. Instead of defining a risky relationship or risky behavior, define a healthy relationship. If you're in a healthy relationship, you're having communication and people are not asking you for certain things, especially certain types of pictures. Talk about the dangers of being in certain chat rooms or in gaming rooms, because again, you don't know who is on the other line. Who are you truly talking to? And Officer Wolfinger kind of mentioned this as well, which is that when you're posting, it's a little bit of be mindful of what you're posting, so you're not bringing in like sexy selfies or in some way it comes off that you're flirting, because with online predators, they are literally trolling the internet all day, and they are looking for that one little thing that they believe that it'll get them in contact with that other person. So as Officer Wolfinger had mentioned, that their phones kind of are the eyes, or you can see right into them. That's what these people are doing. They are really looking at any sort of thing that will open up an opportunity for them to engage in some sort of dialogue. So they can start the conversations requesting things and then trying to provide them money. Okay, and so can you all officers recommend any sort of safety software that's out there or anything? I mean, I know there's a lot of different antiviruses and things you can put on it, but when it comes to really knowing who you're truly communicating with on the other line, I mean, is there a safety software, or does it really just come down to parents monitoring their students' apps?
So from a reactive standpoint, so I talked about the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children earlier. In order to be an internet service provider in the United States, there are certain legal requirements that you have to meet, which includes monitoring what's going on where your specific service is as it relates to child sexual exploitation and enticement. So all of the major providers, Facebook, Google, Instagram, Yahoo, Bing, TikTok, Snapchat, you name it, they all monitor their platforms for child sexual abuse material. And when they identify predatory behavior, whether it be through certain keywords that get flagged or certain images or videos that get flagged, they notify law enforcement, and that's how we pursue a lot of investigations. When we talked about the millions and millions of cyber tips that we're getting, that's how those are coming through, based on the reactive monitoring that all of the internet service providers are doing. From a proactive standpoint, for parents to stay engaged with what's going on in their kids' phones, there's a lot of really good apps out there. There's Bark is a really good one. Norton Family Premier, Phone Sheriff. There's a ton of different apps that allow you to do different things like monitor messages, monitor phone calls, monitor app activity. They allow you to set certain settings on your kid's phone where they lose the ability to access their apps after a certain time. But honestly, I think the most low-tech approach, and probably the most effective, because kids are smart and they figure out how to defeat all of the things that I just talked about, is doing what Officer Wolfinger said and just making it routine and random when you take your kid's phone. and go through it and do a manual search of everything and get into the nitty gritty, look for weird apps, you know, maybe photo vaults that are disguised as calculators, things like that. And even having a family rule after, you know, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, your phones goes to this central location. This is where all the phones charge overnight. And that's where they're going to stay until you get your phone back in the morning when you go to school. A lot of kids stay up till the early morning hours, you know, on their phone. And that just makes them subject to so many more predators when they're on their phone till 1, 2, 3 a.m. Or even aside from online predators, I mean, just being bullied by other kids on the internet. You know, kids lose a lot of sleep, you know, reading comments on their pictures and things like that. So just giving them a healthy break from their phone and having that built into their day, I think is super important. Just, you know, pick a time, 7:30, your phones are mine. Go read a book, watch TV, do something, and just disconnect from the phone. And that could be your time to proactively monitor your kid's phone.
Thank you. We've had a few questions come in. I appreciate that one of our participants said every time that they think of a question, we answer it. But one of the takeaways that she shared was the fact that her children are involved in gaming sites, and they never thought of that. And so I'm glad you mentioned that at the very beginning, because we do have kids, again, engaging now in these social platforms through gaming sites where you are participating in whatever the activity may be in the game with individuals who are all over the place, not just the same city, state, it could be across the entire country and such. And so then that's another avenue that these predators are taking into your home. And then I do want to remind everyone that tonight's presentation is being recorded. And so PTA will be able to reshare the recording, which would include the slides. I know we had some people ask about the slides. And so it is an opportunity to take the slides and use them at home, maybe having that honest conversation or dialogue with your children. But as
Dr. Toronto, you're muted.
can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I don't know what happened. It was working. I don't know how much you heard, but I was basically starting to wind it down for us in regards to if you have any additional questions that you would like to have answered, please take a quick minute to add it into the Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer any remaining questions as we move on to the conclusion of our program. So we'll give you a minute to see if anybody has a question or if any of our police officers have a final comment that they would like to make.
Dr. Toronto, question about the gaming, was that specific to what platforms are being utilized, or was it just a general?
It was general, but if you want to elaborate that, that's totally fine. And we did actually have another question come in. So if you want to elaborate on the gaming piece, go right ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of our like Roblox is a big one right now, where especially younger boys and even girls are getting targeted. And then on Twitch and Discord, which are applications that our kids use to talk about gaming and engage with other gamers. Those are two really big applications right now where we're seeing a lot of cyber tips getting generated, especially as it relates to enticement. Those are the big ones.
Okay. And I believe you answered this question earlier, but it was in regards to, does the RBPD have its own Internet Crimes Against Children task force? I know that, again, Detective Harrison, you're involved in this. Officer Wolfinger, you came from the crimes unit. And so I don't know if it's specific to ICAC, but if you want to answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a member of the LA Area Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force, which is comprised of LAPD, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, Orange County Sheriff's Department, San Bernardino, I believe, and then the majority of the local municipalities, including Redondo Beach, Torrance, Manhattan, El Segundo. So yeah, that's where a lot of the cyber tips that we get come from our partnership and being a part of that task force.
Just had a question come in. Are there phones for kids that aren't smartphones? That's a great question. I honestly don't know, because I have not renewed my phone, and I I've not given in to my son's request for a phone because he's only 7, and I've told him once he has his own job and he can afford to pay for it himself, I'll consider it. So we have some time to go before that. I think that's just something you have to go to your provider and see, do they have an old school, maybe a basic flip phone that only allows. I do remember years ago, there was a phone that was specific to, you can, as a parent, you can only program in certain numbers, and that allowed you to directly communicate with your child. But again, I don't know if that's still on the market or not.
And a lot of the softwares allow you to kind of lock down the features that your kid's smartphone has. And you can basically turn a smart iPhone into a phone that can just dial a set amount of numbers. So even if that tool isn't available anymore, you can turn an iPhone into something like that.
All right, well, I guess I'm gonna wind it down there. If there are no further questions, on behalf of the Redondo Beach PTA, the Redondo Beach Police Department, and the Redondo Beach Unified School District, I would thank everyone for being here tonight. I thank the support of PD and PTA for providing this parent engagement activity or event to really educate all of you on the dangers that are out there for all of our children. I do want to remind everyone who is participating, if you do think or believe that your child is maybe a victim of any sort of predatory grooming that's taking place online, or maybe it's just started, remember, please contact RBPD immediately. Get them involved in this process so that way we can protect your children. So again, I thank you all for being here. There's some very nice comments coming into the box here. Yes, there will be a recording later. Our council PTA will work with the local PTAs to provide a link so that way everyone can have access to it. But on behalf of everyone and all of our panelists tonight, we thank you for joining us. Be safe, be well, be healthy, and have a great summer vacation because it's around the corner. Be safe.